Hi everyone, I'm Pam Fox. How is everyone today? I'm going to need a minute here to share this to my page. If anyone knows a quicker way of how to share to pages and groups all at once, or to do it before you go live, I can't figure out a way to do it. So this will take me a second. How is everyone today? I just came from my niece's color run fundraiser at the beach, where they throw all the colors at you as you're running, as you're walking and running. I didn't run it, I just walked it. So I'm trying to get warmed up. I'm having trouble getting warmed up. So I have my coat on. Looks like I don't have the best connection today. I apologize for that. If anyone wants to give me some advice on how to improve my internet connection for these lives, I would appreciate that as well too. I'm just learning, guys. Like, you know, I'm trying to spread a really important message because I healed my hiatal hernia, and I'm trying to share that with others, how I went about it, the things that I did that worked for me. And obviously the more people that I can reach, the better. And so that's why I do this. I've got two more. That's why I do this. That's why I come on here and share. Oops. Hit the wrong button there. So I belong to a few hiatal hernia support groups. 2 actually, and I belong to 3 GERD support groups. So I'm just sharing this out. I've got one more. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to close that down so it doesn't distract me. And I'm actually going to, I want you to go ahead and post your comments today, because what I'm going to be doing is sharing, as the topic says, why some people have GERD but they don't have hiatal hernia, and why people can have hiatal hernia but not have reflux or not have symptoms. And I'm also going to be talking about why people can have a small hiatal hernia but still have severe symptoms. So these are some of the questions I get asked a lot, so I'm going to do my best to answer those today. First of all, about me, my name is Pam Fox, and you can see more about me at pamfox.org. And please post your comments below. I am actually going to, I'm not disabling my comments, I'm just not revealing my comments to myself, because I often get distracted when I see your comments and then I don't talk about the things that I meant to talk about, and then my videos go on very long because I have trouble staying on topic. It's something I'm working on. But post your comments below, because what I'm going to do, shout out to my friend Ardith, who suggested that I do a series. So today I'm going to talk, and tomorrow I'm going to come on and do a Q&A and answer all of your questions. So post your comments and questions below, and we'll do a Q&A tomorrow. Make sure that you're following me here on Facebook if you appreciate this content and want to learn more, so that you can tune into that Q&A tomorrow. All this month I've been sharing everything that I did and everything that I learned to reverse my hiatal hernia and to put GERD behind me, to be symptom free, all naturally, holistically. So I've got about a week left to go on that, so make sure you follow me if you are interested in learning more. So today's topic, so why is it that we can have, some people have GERD and they don't have hiatal hernia, and some people have hiatal hernia and they don't have GERD? Well, I'm going to do a bit of a refresher, because I know a lot of people join these groups daily and are newly diagnosed with these conditions, so they're just now learning about their condition. So what I like to do is use some diagrams and some props to explain some of this stuff. So first of all, this is, you've all seen this before, this is what your stomach is supposed to look like, kind of hanging out down here in the abdominal cavity. This is the diaphragm, and here where the esophagus comes through the diaphragm is this hole known as the hiatus. Okay, and where the two meet, the esophagus and the stomach meet, is your lower esophageal sphincter, and this is a one-way valve where the food comes down and into the stomach, but it's not supposed to be able to reflux back up into the esophagus. And when it does, that's when we have burning. The acid gets onto the tissues of the esophagus and can cause burning. And for those of you with LPR, the acid travels all the way up and can cause burning higher up into the esophagus. But this is what it's supposed to look like. Lots of room for the stomach to expand, because when it fills with food, it expands. And no pressure on anything. So no pressure, especially on this little valve right here. So let's come over to this side. So here we have a hiatal hernia. So in this case, the stomach is pushing through that hiatus. So now a portion of your stomach is up in the chest cavity. Here's your lower esophageal sphincter up here. Okay, so what happens is with hiatal hernia, you know, when the food comes down, the muscles of this esophagus contract and push that food down, and push it through this one-way valve. But then once it gets here into this portion of your hernia, that muscular contraction known as peristalsis is here, but it's not here. It's here, and it's down here in the lower part of the stomach where it pushes the food out into the intestine. But it's not here up into the top. And so the food comes down into this portion, and now this portion of your stomach is expanding as you eat, especially if you eat a large meal, and the food is trying to make its way through this hiatus. Imagine your stomach, you know, as it expands, but it's got a belt around it, and now the food has to make its way through this hole into the stomach on its own, just through gravity, basically. Okay, and so then, you know, the acid can get up into here and start churning the food, and then as this expands, that can put pressure on that sphincter. That's just one way that we can put pressure on that sphincter. I actually talked in another video about the 14 different ways that we can have, and it's not an exhausted list, pressure on our anatomy, particularly this sphincter, which can cause that acid then to reflux back up. So, so this is hiatal hernia. Now, if you have GERD or LPR, but you don't have hiatal hernia, then that means that your stomach, let me just draw a quick diagram here really quick. Might look something like this. Might look something like this. So how does it get from here to here? And again, your sphincter is where the two meet, where the esophagus and the stomach meet. So why would your stomach get from here to here for those of you that have GERD? The same reason that it got herniated for the person with hiatal hernia, and that's intragastric pressure. And again, I talk about that in another video, all the different ways that we can have intragastric pressure. One of the biggest ways we can have intragastric pressure is constipation. So if we bear down, if we're always having to bear down to pass a bowel movement, that puts a lot of force on that stomach. It pushes it up into the diaphragm. And so what happens over time, if this is my diaphragm and this is my stomach, if there's some kind of force, so imagine this is the force, pushing that stomach up into the diaphragm, it squishes it up there instead of hanging out down here where it's supposed to be. And so if you have those forces long-term, ongoing, all of the time, what happens is that stomach kind of finds its new home up here under the diaphragm instead of hanging out down here. And so I did a whole video about the peritoneum and how your entire abdominal cavity is lined with a membrane known as the peritoneum, and it's like a film, it's like a mucousy thin lining or film, and then all of your abdominal organs as well are encased in that peritoneum, and this is what holds everything in its place. This is what keeps everything in its place in your abdominal cavity. And so over time, long-term force pushing that stomach up under the diaphragm creates new adhesions where the peritoneum will attach itself up and underneath that diaphragm. And so when they do a surgical repair of a hiatal hernia, for example, they have to pull that down, they have to incise and cut away that peritoneum and then reattach it. But if you don't have a hiatal hernia, you can have it, you know, just like this. And it doesn't mean that it's come through the diaphragm yet, it's just connected. But it could in time. If you continue to put that pressure, it could eventually find its way through the diaphragm. So then you have, you know, a hiatal hernia, something like that. Okay, so if you have GERD and you don't have hiatal hernia, the reason that is because it just hasn't made its way through that hiatus yet. So you can have GERD and not have hiatal hernia, but you still have the symptoms because of the pressure. So in this case here, that pressure is pushing that stomach up, and this little guy right here, this little valve right here, you know, it could be pushing into the side of the diaphragm and causing pressure there. The way the stomach, you know, the stomach is kind of hangs out like a little, kind of like a little kidney bean. Oh, I just want to remind you guys that everything in my phone is reversed because I'm live. So this is my left side, and so for me, my stomach would, you know, kind of sit like this, like a little kidney bean, like that. That's what it's supposed to do. And so now if you imagine that pressure pushing that up, what can oftentimes happen, even if you don't have a hiatal hernia, is your stomach it'll fold. A lot of times, you know, if you have a barium swallow, or if you had, you know, an image done and they can see and they'll tell you, you know, you have a kink in your stomach, or your stomach is folded or even twisted. And so that's that pressure pushing that up. And so that can put pressure on that lower esophageal sphincter and cause the reflux, even if you don't have hiatal hernia. Now, if you go to any like conventional, you know, medical website like your WebMDs or your Mayo Clinics, and you start to read all about hiatal hernia, they always say the same thing. They always say that hiatal hernia is very common. Many people have them. Many people have them and they don't even know they have them. And many people have them and they don't have symptoms. To me, I'm not saying I don't believe that's true, but this brings up a lot of questions for me. First of all, why would a person get diagnosed with a hiatal hernia if they're not having symptoms? You don't go in and have an endoscopy or a barium swallow unless you're complaining of something. You have some kind of symptoms. So I'm not really sure how they can say, you know, many people have hiatal hernia and they don't have symptoms. I can see how it would be possible, and the reason for that would be that we are all so very different, and our hernias are also very different. So just depending on how your hernia sits, your body, your lifestyle, your posture, your diet, all of those things will affect how your hernia sits and where and if any pressure is being created on that lower esophageal sphincter or elsewhere. So here's another refresher for you guys. So when you have a hiatal hernia, you know, and you've got a portion of your stomach up here in the abdominal cavity, you've also got, you can't forget that you've also got your lungs up there and your heart up there. And so there's a lot of crowding. So now that stomach is putting pressure on things like this part up here is in your chest cavity, and it's putting pressure on, you know, your heart, your aorta, your lungs. And so that can cause, you know, compromised breathing and chest pain and heart palpitations. We also need to not forget that the stomach is innervated by the vagus nerve, which means it is, a nerve it comes down the length of the stomach and then branches out. Vagus nerve innervation all over the stomach. The same is true for the esophagus and for most of our internal organs within the chest cavity and the abdominal cavity. And so what happens when we have a pinched nerve? Well, all kinds of things can happen. Particularly with people with hiatal hernia, they can get things like panic attacks and anxiety, heart palpitations. So there are a lot of parts of our anatomy that can have undue pressure placed upon them when we have a hiatal hernia. But for some people, yeah, I can see how they could have a hiatal hernia, and for whatever reason, it's not putting pressure on, you know, any of those anatomy, and so therefore they are not symptomatic. Just depending on how everything is sitting, and their body and their diet and their lifestyle, so forth. So the final question that I get a lot is, why, if I have such a small, you know, my doctor says I have a hiatal hernia, he says it's very small, he says it shouldn't be causing any trouble, and yet I have these severe symptoms. Well, again, with a hiatal hernia, you've got a portion of your stomach. Well, for one thing, you've got a belt around your stomach, even if it's just a little bit. Even if it's just a little bit. This belt around your stomach could be pinching your vagus nerve, okay, which could cause a whole host of problems, starting out again with things like anxiety, panic attacks, heart palpitations, a lump in your throat. It doesn't take much. You have to remember that the diaphragm is like this, but the esophagus comes out like this. And so if there's any pressure up there in that chest cavity, let me just draw this really quick. Make sure I feel like I'm explaining it the way I think I'm explaining it. So if there's any, here in this hiatal hernia, if this little portion, even if it's just a couple of centimeters, which is classified as a small hiatal hernia, even if it's just a little bit that's up here in the chest cavity, you got to remember your lungs are here, your heart is here, your aorta runs parallel to your esophagus. So, even if it's just a little bit, it could be enough to put pressure on any of that anatomy and create, you know, severe symptoms. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. I hope that helps you to see more clearly why we can have GERD without hiatal hernia, why we can have hiatal hernia without reflux, and why even if we have a small hiatal hernia, we can have severe symptoms. All right, I'm going to turn my comments back on. Hi, Sarfraz. Hey, Wendy. Hi, everybody. Hi, Suzanne. Hi, Dee. Oh, Dee, congratulations on your publishing your book. Hi, Kathy. Hey, Ian. All right, so you guys, please post your comments. Hey, Paula Rose. Good evening. It's late there. It's early here. Please post your questions about this topic or about hiatal hernia and GERD in general, and I would love to do a Q&A tomorrow. It's going to be earlier in the morning, so probably around 7:30, so I hope you'll tune in for that. Don't forget to follow me here on Facebook if you are interested in hearing more from me over the next week about this topic. I still have a couple more topics to go about how I reversed my hiatal hernia and put all of those horrible, maddening symptoms behind me. So tune in for that. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day.